أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the universe, the Master of the Day of Judgment. I bear witness and testimony to the oneness of Allah, to His magnificence, His omnipotence, His might, His glory, to His being the creator and sustainer of all things, the giver of life, the guider of hearts, the master of the Day of Judgment. And I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is His servant and final messenger. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon all those who choose to tread His path until the last day. The Quran as a text offers to us a lot of different insights in terms of how we are meant to live our lives in these worlds. And the manner in which it presents ideas, ethics, values, historical narrative is not typically rooted in the same mode of linearity that many texts we get exposed to are written. For many of us, when we read a book, it has a beginning and a middle and an end to it. And there's a flow that follows this construct, whether we are children or get to an elder age. But the Quran as a text, its linearity is quite unique, and its face value seems to be quite non-linear. One of the few instances in the Quran where we have that constructed chapter in Surah Yusuf alayhi salam that follows, though, that familiar linear approach to the telling of a story. That you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In the Surah Yusuf, the chapter that talks to us about our Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him. And within this chapter, there's so much that is written that one can pull of wisdom and insight. But as many of us have the blessing, or perhaps for some of us the fitna of spending time with family this weekend, may Allah make things easy for us. The recognition of what this chapter teaches us now in the specific of a relationship that a child within a broader family and every role that that family member plays in relation to each other can be extrapolated from this beautiful chapter of this most beautiful man, alayhi salam. In its very onset, Allah Azza wa Jal starts to tell us of an interaction that the Prophet Yusuf has with his father at a very young age. إِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِأَبِيهِ. The verse it starts that Yusuf alayhi salam, he says to his father, Ya abati, that, oh my beloved father. And here we want to start to just draw insight from where we can extrapolate meaning, regardless of the phase of life that we are in. That even if you don't have your own child, you are somebody else's child. May Allah grant our elders ease and only the best in this world and the best in the next. And if you have the blessing of also being an elder to a child, right in the onset of this verse, we start to see things that can give us insight on what this relationship is ideally meant to be. That the verse in and of itself is going to give us indication of a dream that many of us have likely heard. Whether we have heard it through our own narrations and our tradition, or we hear it through a Judeo-Christian narrative as well, in addition to ours, a lot of you know about the story of the Prophet Yusuf and that he had a dream. But there's so much more you can pull just from this one verse. إِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِأَبِيهِ. That Yusuf says to his father, Ya abati, that, oh my father. The utilization of Ya abati as opposed to Ya abi. And it is right next to the word abihi. Allah is using these two words simultaneously, back to back, for a reason. That it could have just as easily had taken out one of the references to his being his father. Why does he say it twice? There's nothing without meaning in Allah's plan. And so there's something important that's going to go on in this verse that has to do with the fact that this is a father and a son having a conversation with each other. He says it to his father and then addresses his father again. You could have taken one of them out, but they're both there. Meaning, pay attention. This has to do with what it means to be a good father. What it means to be a good parent. And what is the relationship between a child and a parent. Ya Abati has a distinction to it in that it gives now a distinct proximity. There's a love that's there. There is a sense of endearment that doesn't come across if it's written other ways. But fundamentally, you want to also think about what this means. That this is a child that walks into a place and initiates the conversation with the elder. It's not a father that's sitting down and says, I have something to talk to you about, but it's the child saying to the father, there's something that I have going on to discuss with you. He's going to talk to him about a dream. My son walked into our room this morning, and his voice was wavering a little bit, and I was half asleep. My wife was already up and talking to him, and I said, did you have a nightmare? And he said, no, and he was having an argument with his sister about what to watch on TV. And I muttered like a few different words to him, and then I just threw my head back into the pillow and went back to sleep. Yaqub alayhi salam, he's paying attention to what his child has to say. And his child already knows that whatever it is that I'm going to say to my father is going to listen. That he knows that something is there within him, and that when he is looking now for a space to express, the establishment of the relationship is not one that is just simply that I am the father and you are the son, so I'm the one that brings food into the house, I'm the one that brings a check and puts it into the bank, I'm the one that works and validates my excessive work-life balance being imbalanced in the favor of work, away from anything other than me spending time with you that allows for this moment to be created. That enables us to have such a bond that when something is agitating you, you know that I'm going to be the one to listen to you. And all he does is listen. The verse in its entirety doesn't have interruptions or explanations in response. But Yusuf alayhi salam is a boy when he is experiencing this. He is not an old man. He spends most of his adult life away from his family, given the rest of the story that we know. إِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِأَبِيهِ يَا أَبَتِ, that he knows there's a reason why he can come to his father and speak in this way to him. I want you to think about this aspirationally for yourself. Because yesterday is not something that you can go back and change, but you can still learn from it. And you understand within the confines of where you live in this moment that there's many tomorrows you potentially will see. And may Allah make the best of our deeds the last of our deeds. And not let any one of us leave this world other than in a state that is pleasing to Him. You can't be in a place where this religion is only about externals and ritualistic elements. You can't somehow allow for it to be something that you pull out of your pocket to validate and justify behaviors of yourself, but to also invalidate somebody else's behaviors when they're contrary to what brings you ease. Part of reflection is that it should make you uncomfortable. It should allow for you to unpack experience in a mindful way, but it's not going to always be something that feels good. And for all of us sitting in this room, there is insight that can be drawn from this fundamental, foundational aspect of what it means to be a part of this tradition. Family is important. But it's not important based off of roles that are assigned culturally that says because you are a man, suddenly you don't tell the kids in your life that you love them. It doesn't mean that because you are a woman and a mother is now confined only to particular roles. Here is a child whose father is sitting with him and they have a deep, endearing relationship that the father is willing to actually pay attention to what the child has to say. And if you don't do this with the young people in your life, or if you didn't have somebody that did this for you, in each instance, you got on this blessed day of Jumu'ah say, what is this Quran actually trying to teach me about what it means to be a person? The paradigm shift is a benefit not just to the one that you engage in with empathy, but to yourself. I love spending time with my babies. And the ability to be able to find a different sense of strength and energy that comes from that uniqueness. That my self-talk is one that's going to create for me a vantage point. You are trying to figure out who to get married to. Get married to somebody that you know is going to actually be present for the children in your lives. You're going to be in a place where you have a blessing that is a loved one that you bore into this world and you were grown enough to decide you were going to have a child. You better then raise it with the attentiveness that our tradition teaches us. Al-Bara radiallahu anh, he says in an Adab al-Mufrad, a book of hadith that teaches us about ethics and values, that on one occasion he sees the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam walking with his grandson on his shoulders, making dua to Allah that, Ya Allah, love him as I love him. If the Prophet ﷺ's companion Al-Bara could hear that he loves his grandson, and 14 centuries later we know and understand that the Prophet definitively said this, then definitely the grandson of the Prophet knew that his grandfather loved him. The kids that you sit with today, or the kids that you will be blessed to sit with down the line, it can't be left to assumption. They have to know inside and out that you love them. They're not going to remember moments that are just mechanical hugs on the day of Eid. But to be in a place and draw from what our text teaches us, not something that's just assumption or somebody's whims and desires. إِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِأَبِيهِ يَا أَبَتِي. It's all written right there. That Allah is telling you, hey dads, read this. I'm talking about you twice. And Yaqub alayhi salam, you are not busier than he is. He is a prophet of God. The ability now to have that attentiveness in the prism of modernity necessitates thinking also about what else is it that distracts us. In order for you and I to be present for the ones that look up to us, it requires us to engage in a self-care mode that deals with our own stresses, that deals with our own anxieties. You don't want to have a conversation that passes on generational trauma, that somebody above you didn't deal with the clutter that was inside of them well, and when you came to talk to them with care and tenderness and affection, they just shut you down or yelled and screamed. The opportunity to not allow for technological devices to be something that distracts attentiveness, that there's always something that's pulling you someplace else, but you create a boundary that says that when I'm here, nobody else is going to take my attention away from what this beautiful soul has to say to me. Ya abati, he says. And he doesn't say to him, oh Yusuf, I got a lot going on. He doesn't say, go and talk to your aunt. He doesn't say, your brothers are there, they'll teach you something. But he comes seeking the attentiveness of his father, and the father gives him the attentiveness. Just think and reflect on this day of Jumu'ah. Because at some point or another, most everyone in this room is going to have somebody who is younger engage them in this way. This is not a tradition that teaches us that we chase after the dunya to the extent that when we're in our last legs in this world and transitioning into the next, that regret is something that fills us because we wish we hadn't worked so hard. Or we wish that we had actually expressed our feelings to others. When you tell a young child in your life that you love them, not only do they hear that you love them, but you get to hear that you love them also. And it comes back now to the impact of your own heart. Recognize with deep reflection, not rumination, what was it like in terms of relationships you had with the elders in your lives? Was there moments where you wished you could say something, but you weren't given the opportunity to speak? Were there things that you had to say and you longed to say, but no one really wanted to understand or give you the space? Each one of you, whether you are in this room and you are 5 weeks old, or you are 50 years old, or you are near 100 years old, the children that you were still exist inside of you. And they formulate for you a perspective through which you see this world. Your core belief structure cognitively now starts to affirm itself through how you process reality. And then you pass that on to the other people that are in your lives. So you want to just take a breath. And in these days of rest, where literally the whole country has the day off, you take some time to just listen. To not be the one that's speaking. To hear. To understand. When we clean up the closets in our house, there's tons of things that my kids have not touched for years in their life. My wife goes through the hassle of when one of them actually spots something in a garbage can that they haven't touched for years. How can you get rid of this thing? It's so important to me. You've only been alive for 7 years, bro. It's really not that serious. They're not going to remember sometimes certain things, but certain things will stick. When I sit and I think about what is it that I remember from when I was 3 years old, when I was 5 years old, when I was 7 years old, what are things that I don't need photographs for or videos for or anything? I can't tell you what my parents gave to me on Eid when I was 6. I can tell you that I still remember the dua I made when I was 6 because my father and my mother pulled me aside when we went for Umrah and it was the first time in my life, and they said to me that this dua is so important. I don't know what they gave me for Eid or on my birthday, and I don't even know how we celebrated my birthday that year. But I distinctly remember walking with my face staring at the ground, staring at my feet every step of the way and not looking up because of that conversation I had with my father. There's things that stick with you and you know what they are, and there's some things that stick with us. May Allah grant us healing that we don't want to have stick with us. وَإِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِأَبِيهِ يَا أَبَتِي. It's all there. The goal is to be in a space where there's reciprocity, a sense of respect that goes in both directions. You gotta want to have that relationship with a young person in order for it to manifest that way. رَأَيْتُ أَحَدَ عَشَرَ كَوْكَبًا وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ. I saw 11 stars and the sun and the moon. This is a boy talking about something he just experienced. Have you ever seen the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time? The few instances in daylight when you can potentially see the moon and it just seems a little bit off. It's not something that's typical. Seeing stars with the moon is not a problem. Being in a place now where they're all combined together gives now this child a sense of anxiety. And you know that it's there because he already says, رَأَيْتُ أَحَدَ عَشَرَ كَوْكَبًا. I saw 11 stars. And then he said he saw the sun and the moon. The sequential order of it doesn't even flow. You see the moon with the stars, not the sun with the stars. And after he already said رَأَيْتُ, he says it again. رَأَيْتُهُمْ لِلسَّاجِدِينَ. When you're talking to a kid and they repeat things, you think about this as a lived experience. My son, my daughter, they come and they're flustered inside. They have a moment that just shakes them up internally. I saw 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them. I saw them. The father is just absorbing every word. He's taking it in. It It's again not a push away that these are not things that mean so much. It's not something that's without seriousness or credence to the young person that's in front of him. Yusuf alayhi salam, he knows there's meaning to this. He has 11 brothers. We know the story. And already we can assume that his mind is putting 2 and 2 together. That if these 11 stars are analogous to the brothers that he has, then likely this sun and moon, it has something to do with his parents, his family on a whole. And the structure from this verse can give us deep insight for how we either aspire or in the moment engage those beloveds that are in our lives. Can we have everyone move up again, please? And come in close. Symbolism in the Quran is not something, again, that is just by chance. But there is nothing that is without meaning in Allah's plan. And so you think now about the young boy that finds himself centered in this dream, this narrative that he is experiencing. The 11 stars, we are taught, they are in reference to a sibling. And you think now, especially within a Meccan society, where the majority of this surah is said to be Meccan in its nature. Its revelation takes place prior to the Hijrah. And how do stars relate to people at that time? They're modes of guidance and navigation as they start to get from one place to the other. They help to illuminate journeys and offer to people as they traverse this earthly plane a mechanism through which they have a little bit more structure and support so that they can get from one point to the next. You are a sibling to somebody. This is what the Quran is teaching you aspirationally to allow for yourself to understand a sibling to be. If you are somebody's sibling and they are not doing this for you, you also have to understand that this is not a text that tells us to chase after romanticized ideals and notions. But embedded within it is what is the ideal and what is the intent. It doesn't mean we live up to it. So here you have an understanding. Ya abati. You want to have that respect, but there's reciprocity, right? Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he says that people are called abrar, the dutiful ones, because they understand there's a duty from the child to the parent as well as from the parent to the child. And as you start to unpack what these things are symbolic of, it creates now, even if it's difficult, an opportunity to say, I didn't have a good father. My sister, my brother, they didn't fulfill the role of a good sibling. And that's sometimes okay to say. And sometimes it's okay to look deeply within. It's literally a story of brothers who threw their youngest brother into a well and then pretended as if his life was taken, and their father cried so much as a result of it, he loses his eyesight. It's not romanticized, it's real. The ideal as a sibling is that you are meant to be that guiding light that shines. Your luminosity is something that allows for a younger person in your life to benefit, not have detriment from your presence. And if you don't live up to the potential of the symbol, then you recognize there is a God that you are going to stand in front of one day. May Allah grant us ease on that day. The word shams, in its grammatical understanding, is a feminine word, and the word qamar is masculine. There's different opinions if the word shams here and the word qamar, which refers to a mother and which refers to a father. And the insights can be something that both have evidence, but it's moving now from his siblings to his parents. And you can understand now relationally that if there are different opinions on which one is the mother and which one is the father, then you can fulfill both of those roles. And there's a unique relationship why our religion has so much elementally that we are taught to engage in. You have water that you make wudu with. There's a sun that moves, that helps you to understand the timings of prayers. The sun and the moon here. You just got to think and reflect to draw meaning. Why is Allah telling us about stars in relation to a family matter? Why is He telling us about the sun and the moon? You live on an earth that revolves around a sun, and you have a moon that revolves around an earth. In order for there to be continuity, there is going to be a need of understanding that at certain times the child is going to be the one that is running to its parent, literally orbiting it, running circles around it. And then there's going to come a time when the elder is going to need to rely upon the younger. And there's not any one of us in this room, Allah knows best what our time frame is in this world. But if you're going to get to a place where you get older, then you recognize the reciprocity that's mentioned in that hadith is not just for the benefit of the child, but for the adult as they grow. وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. The dua says that be merciful to them as they did nurture me when I was younger. It's in a dual form. Both parents do the nurturing, not just one. You can be the sun or the moon. You're in a space where the sun gives you vitality, it gives you life, it allows for you to function in ways that you feel empowered and strengthened. You exist in such a way where as the sun, your light is something that is so real that the moon that you are in partnership with, it only exists as a reflection of the light that you give off. There's connection across all of it. It's not just meant to be one day in a calendar year when a system that is other than your own tells you to take a break and you have nothing other to do than by default hang out with your family, that you then sit and spend time with them. But you build it into the routine with regularity. And you start to understand, what is all of this about? And Yusuf alayhi salam, he is in a place where he's trying to understand it. Lisajideen, these things are prostrating to me. What does it mean? How does it make sense? The stars, the sun, the moon, they're submitting themselves to me. Yaqub alayhi salam, his ego is not put into a place of overdrive. But he recognizes what this is all about. And when you're in a space where you can understand that there's things that you can learn as an elder from a young person. There's no age that you suddenly hit and then it just stops. But you're in a space where you see and you're willing to take instruction from whoever it is that Allah speaks wisdom to you through. And Yusuf alayhi salam, he is struggling with this. But he is lucky that he has a father that actually loves him, that he can go and talk to when he's trying to figure out what this world means. And the father is not throwing out answers that he is quote-unquote supposed to say, things that he has memorized from somebody else, or just passing on stuff that didn't make sense, that he was accustomed to generations before. But he makes it about the nearness and dearness of this one child. He sees him as an actual person with his own strengths, his own non-strengths. You start to think about that. When you spend these days, even if you are at a distance from your loved ones, you can't physically be with them in terms of this world. My elderly father had a severe stroke about 6-7 years ago that still he is paralyzed on the right side of his body and he can't speak. May Allah grant him healing and shifa, and grant your loved ones a complete healing and shifa as well. My opportunity to spend time with him prior to that moment is something that I'm so grateful for, that we went to Canada together, my father, my mother, and I, for about a week, only the three of us. And they came to a conference I was speaking at, and at the end of it, my elderly Punjabi, Kashmiri father, As we went our separate ways at the airport here, came and hugged me and gave me a kiss on my head, and he said, "You spoke really well. And this was one of the best weeks of my life." That was the last thing I heard my father ever speak to me. And when he went into the hospital, I was in Florida. I flew back on the first flight I could, landed in JFK, drove to LaGuardia where my car was parked, and then drove to New Jersey. 7 hours in between when I found out. And I sat in that hospital for about 2 months. And nothing here stopped. You all are still sitting in Jumu'ah here 7 years later. The Islamic Center didn't break down. Where did that time come from all of a sudden? Every other excuse of busyness and doing this, where I couldn't sit for more than perhaps a few hours to have a meal every few weeks with my parents. You don't want the same thing to be the catalyst for you to then understand that there's different ways for you to spend your time. You have the blessing of loved ones, even if they're miles away, then make sure that you are reaching out. People who have passed away from this world, you go to make dua for them. None of you have ever visited the grave of my grandfather. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, but why would you do that? He doesn't even exist in your consciousness. But you have to ask why your grandfather doesn't exist in your consciousness. You have to sit and think about what the blessings truly are of young people around you. We weren't given them as an outlet for the ill self-care that we have, but they were there for us as a means of continuity, and you want to pass on love the way the Prophet passed on love, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You want to teach them to celebrate God in their life and to not have a vision of a God that's an angry old man in the sky, because they have a vision of you that you're an angry old person. If you haven't done it before, make sure that today is the first of many days that you reach out to somebody that you love and you say that you love them. I asked my children today, what is it that I should talk about at Jumu'ah? And they said, Baba, you should talk about how we should be thankful for what we have. And I said, well, what does that mean? And then my daughter said that, we should be appreciative of what we have. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, we should be grateful for what we have. I said, you said the same thing 3 times. And she said, just tell people that they should be kind. And they should be thoughtful. Should think of others. I'm sorry if people did not do that for you. It's a very real thing. Your heart will not heal if you just give continuity to the absence of what you needed that was not given to you. And what can fill you and heal you fully is by recognizing that sometimes the little things, they do make a big difference. And where and how you might be on the other end of the relationship, if you are not honoring the role of being a good parent, a good sibling, a good child, then think about it. Reflect on this verse of Surah Al-Yusuf. And allow for yourself to understand that you have these days, what are they going to mean to you? And how are you going to create moments that are going to last with the people around you well beyond anything that might be a tangible transaction of a gift, but an experience that lives within their heart, that gives them strength as they live out all of their days in this world. It's something to think about while we have the time to do so. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. Before we make dua, a thing to reflect upon, that in a community like ours that is as diverse as this, where there are a lot of people who are not here at this moment because they have gone to visit elsewhere, there are many who are here because there's not necessarily another place to go. And your responsibility as you sit and you pray side by side with your brothers and sisters is to not let this be a relationship that stands and starts and stops when you walk into a room. But you take some time at the conclusion of the prayer to turn to the people around you. Ask them who they are, what their names are. The hearts will beat deeply and with a distinction when you're able to pray with people who you actually have an intimacy with. And you understand that community is a gift, is a blessing, but you play a role in making it a blessing for someone else. That there are many who don't have friends and family that are inviting them to things. There are people who spend many of their days alone, whether they have it on a holiday or not. And you might be the one that needs to extend the hand. So take some time on this day of Jumu'ah. The Prophet ﷺ, he says that the best of you are the ones who greets those that they know and those that they do not know. So aspire to be the best. Learn somebody's name and where they came from before you leave from this day of Jumu'ah. You might find somebody who's going to be one of your best friends for the rest of your life. You just take the opportunity, as we are all gathered here together, and you have to want it in order for it to actualize. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah. Beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We ask that you shower your infinite mercy upon this gathering, granting each and every one who is present herein and our loved ones only the best in this world and the best in the next. We ask, Ya Allah, that if all of us are meant to be together only at this time, at this place, whether we are young or old, male or female, regardless of our race, our ethnicity, our social class, our country of origin, our cultural heritage, whether we are Muslim or come from a different walk of life, Ya Rabbi, if our individual hearts are meant to be in the presence of all of their hearts that are gathered here, only at this time, at this place, then gather us all together again in the best of places in the world beyond this one. Increase us, Ya Allah, in all that is good. Increase us in courage, compassion, and confidence. Protect us from affliction, anxiety, and anguish. Remove from our hearts any feelings of bitterness, jealousy, animosity, or envy towards any of your creation. Grant us hearts that are filled with understanding and hope. Hearts that are drawn towards things of real goodness and beauty. Hearts that find themselves deep in your remembrance. For indeed in your remembrance do hearts find rest. Help each one of us, Ya Allah, to be in a place where we honor the rights of all those that are around us. For those who seek companionship in this world, Ya Rabbi, give to them only the best of companions. For those who are longing for marriage, Ya Allah, bring to them those who will be best for them in this world and in the next, and they also good for the other. For those who are longing for children, Ya Rabbi, grant them children who will be a true coolness to their eyes. And for each one of us, Ya Allah, who has the blessing of even just one other person in our life that we know cares for us, help us to always value and appreciate that care in our words, in our actions, in our demeanor. And for any time that we have broken that trust, forgive us and give us the strength to rebuild it as best as we can. Make us those who tell the people in our lives that we love, that we actually love them. Those that we are grateful for, Ya Rabbi, make us those who truly express and say to them that we are thankful for them. Amen. Let not any one of us be from those who has to understand a blessing in our life only when we have lost it. But make us those who honor it and cherish it when it's something that is actually present for us in this world. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وأقم الصلاة